Hello, my name is Hasan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, Shorts. There's no co-host on these Shorts episodes. These are now around 6 to 8 minute long observations, ideas, thoughts, or rants about the literature, philosophy, psychology, and even the theology of leadership. Because listening to me talk about leadership for now around 6 to 8 minutes is still better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Even that business book that has been sitting in your Amazon queue that you just haven't been able to bring yourself to purchase for around the last 6 months. The truth about Volodymyr Zelensky, the current and sixth president of the Ukraine, and the current wartime leader of Ukraine in its war against the Russian Federation, is that he's probably the leader most representative of leadership of a particular generational moment in our world today. Or, in other words, we all watching his leadership from the outside shouldn't really be surprised by the leadership failures and mistakes of a man who spent the majority of his professional life so far entertaining with jokes and satire and playing pretend. The fact is, Zelensky's 45 years old, and anyone who was born in the weird years of the late 1970s can tell you that, as the youngest end of the generational cohort known as Gen X, they weren't prepared to lead anyone anywhere by the generation ahead of them, now retiring and leaving a leadership vacuum. There were roughly 17.5 million births in the United States between 1975 and 1980. This population of people graduated high school in the early to mid-1990s. The vast majority of them were the second children of the first marriages of the baby boomers, or they were the first children of the second marriages of the baby boomers. This generation experienced both Nirvana and the first George W. Bush, and many of them went off to war in the backwash of the terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers in 2001. This historical arc of technology, politics, and history created the ways in which this generation, the second children with chips on their shoulders and a deep sense of independence, coasted quietly in the background, managing the baby boomers and biding their time for the last 20 years. These dynamics, these historical, technological, and political dynamics, lead to a sense of bewildered, drifting, learning on the job type leadership in the present, particularly when a crisis shows up. But whether you like it or not, over the next 15 years, with the millennials nipping at their heels and the Gen Zers not yet ready for prime time, there's a yawning leadership vacuum that has to be filled by someone right now. And thus we get back to our sober analysis of the current president of the Ukraine, as well as the current leadership in many organizations today. Look, the reason we are in a current leadership crisis in the West are many, but here's three for you to chew on. We have a lack of discernible meaning anchored to a transcendent understanding of reality. We suffer from a remarkable lack of courage and clarity from people in positions of power, not leadership, about what the problems in the West actually are. And, of course, we have an overwhelming need to entertain and engage in hyperbolic over-exaggeration for the purpose of generating clicks and, of course, mining attention. But the most notable reason for our leadership crisis, the one that jumps out the loudest from the president of the Ukraine's leadership in this existential crisis facing the Ukraine and the West right now, the most notable reason is a reason of unseriousness. Sure, Zelensky can don the khaki green outfit of seriousness, as Castro did years before him, but as serious intellectual and public voices have abandoned the public square of leadership and their place in the hierarchy of leadership wisdom, they have been replaced by the voices of entertainers, comedians, and marketers. Zelensky, that comedian and actor, is emblematic of this shift. A man more comfortable talking to David Letterman than to the head of the UN, Zelensky's leadership in the war walks a tightrope between being unbelievable from the perspective of people used to cynical, attention-grabbing celebrity behavior, and admirable from the perspective of an older generation of people who really just want the quote-unquote young'uns to step up already and stop complaining about what they didn't get. Look, whether or not Zelensky is winning the war against Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation on the ground becomes an irrelevancy when his leadership is examined from this perspective and context. He's already a towering leadership figure on the small screen of our mobile phones, where all our unserious impressions about leadership are emanating from now anyway. And well, that's it for me. Thank you for listening and subscribing to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. If you're listening to this on any of the major podcast players, like iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, please go ahead and leave us a 5-star review and write a little bit in there. A couple of sentences is good enough. That actually helps us game those algorithms that I was just maybe addressing. And, of course, it helps us grow the show. Tell all your family, tell all your friends, and tell the leaders in your life that you know that need to be listening to this show, that this show exists. By the way, if you want to get started on the leadership path yourself, or you know some people who need to go on the leadership path, HSCT Publishing, the home company of Leadership Toolbox and Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, can help you and your team do that. So check out our training webinars, coaching services, and more at leadershiptoolbox.us. We are remote, we're live, we're in person, we're on video, and we've got leadership development solutions for your civic group, nonprofit staff, public sector staff, or even your private sector leaders. And of course, you're going to want to check out our video-based subscription service at leadingkeys.com. That's leadingkeys.com for leadership development on demand. You don't like videos, you don't like training, but you really like the podcast? Well, I would also recommend reading a book. Matter of fact, I'd recommend reading my most recent book, 12 Rules for Leaders, The Foundation of Intentional Leadership. You can get that in paperback, hardcover, or as an ebook on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Ingram Spark, and any other place that you order books online. Finally, of course, we're on YouTube just like everybody else is. We'd love to have you help us grow the YouTube channel, so like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the HSCT Publishing channel on YouTube. Just search for HSCT Publishing, or you can search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button. Subscribing helps us grow the show, as it does with the audio, just is the same with the video. All right, that's it for me.